Hello, everyone. Good day to you. My name is Dr. Ikenna Ezealah, and today I'm going to be reflecting on the question, is democracy the right form of government to achieve developments for Africa? And I will argue that no, democracy is not the form of government you use for development, but to manage realized development. Now, how can we clarify and explain this? First of all, I'll address the elephant in the room. Many people hold the assumption that the United States was a democracy when it was established, and it used democracy to develop. Quickly, I'm going to tackle that head on. What is democracy but a government of and by the people, represented by the people, right? Whereby the people participate equally in governance. You see, when the U.S. was established, there were primarily 6 demographic of people. There were male and female Native Americans, male and female Black Africans, and then male and female of white Europeans. Of those 6 primary demographics, how many could vote? Answer, only landowners among the white men could vote, which means 1/6 of those people, only 1 out of 6 could participate in voting and governance. And of that, even small percentage, landowners. Question, is that a democracy that represents the people? No, it is not. And did you know further that, you see, the Senate was not elected by the people. The Senate was elected by the members of the House of Representatives until 1913, which meant logically now that those participating in government had the power to set the developmental agenda, had to be wealthy landowners. And then only among their midst could senators now be appointed. Is that a democracy? No, that is power concentrated in the hands of a few. And what is the word for that? It is an oligarchy. It is a feudal system akin to what existed in Europe, where you had feudal lords, right, who controlled the levers of power, and then you had serfs working on the land. It was the exact same thing in the U.S., only it was called and marketed as democracy. The U.S. did not use democracy to develop. It used an oligarchy, a feudal system. And then it was only in about 1870 that Black men were then given the right to vote, but we know they could not exercise it. And then it was until 1920 that women were now given right to vote. But really, it was until 1965 where you had the Voting Rights Act that removed discriminatory practices that are now allowed participation. So we can actually say it was from 1776, July 1st, it took almost, you can say 200 years later for voting rights for all to participate. That establishes a principle that operates in the world today. If you see China, right, what do they have? A communist party where in the initial stage of its modern development, you had power and the developmental agenda concentrated in the hands of only a few people. Because that is the stage of development that is proper for a country, right? That's still trying to modernize and achieve the initial stages of development, right? Where power needs to be concentrated in the hands of a few. Benevolence, authoritarianism, that sets the agenda that all then follow. And after the public and industry achieve sufficient strength, only after that can you then have mass participation equally in governance. That's just the principle. Same with Singapore in Lee Kuan Yew, He held authoritarian power, but benevolent authoritarian. China with Deng Xiaoping. Go through and look at it. And where has there been development? Even in European history, you'll see it is a monarch like hands in the power of a few setting the developmental agenda that achieves mass development. That is the initial principle. Even if you look in colonial Africa, now let's engage there. When the same Europeans now who are talking about democracy wanted to achieve initial infrastructure developments, what form of government did they establish? Centralized power in the hands of only a few to implement basic developmental agendas for the exporting of raw materials. And democracy, what we call it, representative democracy, was only instituted when they were leaving. Yet Africans today will argue with you that we need to make sure we bolster our democracy so that we have equal. You cannot achieve development that way. Benevolent authoritarianism in the hands of only a visionary few who have the welfare of the population at heart. That is how you achieve development, initial stages of development. But let's go further a little bit. Let's go to work a little bit. You see, then there is the idea that IMF and World Bank gives about, open up to foreign direct investments. But you'll see historically also that that's not what the U.S. did. You see, it is through protectionism that you can establish indigenous and local strength. What do I mean? When in the initial stages of the initial years, you had people from Africa, from Europe coming in, what did they establish? They basically, slavery came into being because they said, okay, you can be an indentured servant and work your way after maybe 7 years or whatever terms. Then you get, 5 acres and a mule? That's how that term came about. But then they did not want a lot of people to own land. They wanted to control the land and the resources. So they extended the terms of the indentured servitude. And then they made it lifetime. Then they now said if you have a child, they're born into it. Then they gradually took rights. What was the point of that? To make sure that land and resources are controlled by the people, by just a few people, like the white people. That was the idea. So in other words, you protect it from a lot of foreign intrusion so that the locals can be empowered. That is protectionism. And in addition, there's this idea that they'll say, okay, removal of subsidies so that, you can invest it in other areas. No, that's not how you develop. Because you see, slavery was an internal subsidy that kept prices low to outcompete European goods, the cash crops, so that you now earn more revenue. And even until today, you have this mass subsidies that are given to farmers. And the U.S. has always given many different subsidies and developmental supports to its industries. So think about it, right? The government structure democracy you don't use to achieve initial development. It is power concentrated in the hands of a few visionaries, like benevolent authoritarianism, to set the developmental agenda until the population gets strong enough to contribute. So one, that form of government, the U.S. did that, but they dressed it up and they marketed it as democracy, even though it wasn't. It was a feudal system, an oligarchy dressed up as democracy. Then protectionism, which means that you now protect the level of foreign ownership in your domestic assets. That's how you do it. That's what China does, and that's why people are just criticizing China. And then, in addition to that, you need subsidies and perks to give your industries time to mature and grow strong, which is what the U.S. does, which is why they issue sanctions against this and that party to vilify so that their domestic industries remain strong. So when you assess all of these things, when you understand the nuances, you see that Africa is accepting a pipe dream. Because the democratic system is a Trojan horse, that it is an arm of capitalism and imperialism that allows the highest bidder to have control of office. That's not the indigenous system that Africans have been using. So the African people need to understand what is in their best interest. Look at in Africa where you have some measures of developments today. Where do you see it? In Rwanda. Is that a typical democracy? No. And even if you look, the quickest development has happened when power has been in the hands of a few, even in contemporary Africa. So we have to understand that what we need to do is to study history acutely, understand the principles and apply it. And that's why China said we're going to have our own governmental model to develop. Market system, but we're going to concentrate this developmental powers in the hands of a few. The U.S. did the exact same thing. And if you study U.S. history, the same people in the Supreme Court will end up being government officials and then presidents here. They were recycling themselves. They were the exact same thing as the Communist Party, only they were called different and it has a different form. Same with Singapore, same with different people. And when Europeans came to Africa, were they doing democracy? They were not. Power was concentrated in the hands of a few. They set the developmental agenda that everyone else then followed. But they sold democracy to you Africans, right? To us. And we accept it as us using it to develop. But what can you achieve with a rotating presidency every 4 years that disrupts the constancy of policy that's required to develop? My people, wake up, study, and form the right governments that is suited to you. This is the path that we need to follow for our own liberation. To understand what is suitable for us will be different in its form and nature. This also means that the best among us, the most skilled and the most visionary, should stand up and take the lead with the interest of the public at heart. This is not to say that this is nefarious on the part of the West or even the U.S., because they defend their interest and they pursue their interest relentlessly. Yeah, there were nefarious effects, but the point is that don't listen to people's words. Listen to what they did. The recommendations these international organizations are giving you to develop can never develop you, the African people. Yes, many forms of protectionism that ensures resources, that ensures policies, that ensures power is in the hands of the local people, cultivates it. And then you give subsidies so that your industries can develop. That's how you do it. But we're waking up and we understand the assignments and the objective. We understand that our people have been sold smokes and mirrors. We understand that we need to build what is suitable for us without looking left or right. We understand that this is our responsibility as African people. And in order to develop, we have to form ideas and philosophies aligned with our indigenous image and our heritage. We understand this, and we understand that we must stand up and take possession of our future by first of all securing our present. And that those skilled among us who are gifted with the vision of leadership, who are visionaries, who are skilled statesmen, who are builders of the African future, who are nation builders, who are political lions, that those among us should stand up and participate in the striving and the struggle to take possession of leadership, of office, in order to steer the ship of states towards a brighter destiny. It must be done. Nation builders, builders of the African future. How long will you be content remaining in the private sector, just making money for private family welfare and relaxation? How long will you allow this state of affairs to continue when you see the trajectory of the African continent going downward? When you see that amongst the so-called leadership are mostly just misleaders? Look at the condition of the African continent. Look at how it is drifting. No, those who are among the African people globally must realize, must hear the call of destiny now to stand up and to take possession of your various countries, to institute measures that will empower and uplift your people. And by creating structures, right, governmental forms that is suited to your own indigenous needs without looking left or right. Builders of the African future, stand up and let us get to work.